Hi and welcome back to one of our supermarket flower series. Now today I'm using a very simple bouquet of flowers that has come from Morrison's. So if you're here in the UK, this is a bunch of flowers that I picked up yesterday and it's called a seasonal bouquet, so nothing too difficult to remember. I've got a slightly different colour than the bunch I've got in my hand here at the moment, but the contents is exactly the same. So there's a couple of lilies, some Tanacetum, which is this very small flower here, something called Carthamus, which I'll talk to you about in a little while, and one solitary snapdragon. So not a huge amount of flowers, and it's only cost me £5. So I'm not going to do a huge arrangement, but this is something that's really good for beginners or for if you're practicing, and I think you're going to enjoy what I'm going to create with it. Now, it comes with one piece of foliage called Pittosporum, but to add to it, I've chosen a few pieces from the garden. These are optional. If you can include some foliage in your design, that it really take it to the next level, but don't worry too much if you can't get it. I've picked a very vibrant stem of red berries, and this one is hawthorn. So you could look for something similar in your surrounding area, just something that's quite tall and thin. We're in the autumn here, so I've got the addition of these fabulous berries, but just try and get something that's about twice the height of your container, and that will really help elevate your design. Then I have a browny red coloured foliage. This is one of the cherry blossom, and in the springtime it would have a beautiful blossom on the top of it, but through the summer and the autumn it has this gorgeous red toned foliage. And my theme and my colour combination is sort of autumnal, so that's going to work really well. But you could have privet or rosemary, it could even be conifer. Try and get something that's not too straight and not too severe, something that has a little bit of movement in it, and that's going to help create some height in your arrangement. We are here in the UK and it is autumn, so I thought a small amount of the oak leaf with these beautiful green acorns emerging on the bottom would be a lovely material to use at this time of the year. Very much synonymous with our autumn. And then this is privet, so it's a variegated privet, very basic ordinary foliage that you could have at home to hedge or separate off your neighbouring properties. It's quite straight, so it'll work well with the other materials that's more relaxed and has more movement in it. But if you can't get privet, anything that you might have available is going to work and help you create an interesting design. Now I'm going to use a container that I originally had orchids in. So these came in a pack of 8 and they had a beautiful orchid growing in there. The orchids were used for weddings, and I've kept the terracotta pot. Again, I feel it's got quite an autumn feel to it, and that's going to be my container for today. But anything that's quite tall, it's probably about the size of my hand if we look at the top part of it, and if I just hold it against my hand there, you can see the size. That I think is going to be in proportion with my flower content, bearing in mind that I don't have a huge amount of flowers to use. I think this is going to work well. Could be a flower pot that you might have at home, a small vase, or anything that's maybe 5 inches or so in height. What we have to remember with terracotta, and this doesn't apply to all materials or all containers that you might use, the terracotta is porous, so therefore the water is going to leak out of my floral foam and it's going to make that container really wet. So what I've done to prevent that from happening is I've used just an old plastic bag. This would have been recycled from my shopping. It could be a piece of cellophane, it could be a plastic plant pot if you have one that will fit inside the container. But this is going to help stop the water leaking out from my foam into the container. I cut myself a piece of foam that's roughly the same size as my container. I don't want to have it too tall because then I have the issue of covering all the foam at the very end. So I'm going to push this down into my container so that it's completely disappears and I don't have anything protruding out over the top. So anything cellophane, black bag, anything that you might want to reuse, That will help give me a waterproof layer, and I'm going to force that down as far as I can go and cut off the excess plastic. So I've cut off the excess plastic, and we can get rid of that in the recycling, and I'm just going to push down the top sort of inch or so of the plastic liner. This will hopefully help any water from sort of spilling out over the top. What you might find with terracotta is the top section might siphon out some of the water from in the foam. It's not too much of a problem if you're just arranging flowers at home, but if you're giving this as a gift to somebody, bear that in mind. You don't really want to give your friend or your family member a container that's wet for them to place on their dining room table, which is going to cause damage to their table. So make sure that that's really watertight before giving it away as a gift. Included in the bouquet of flowers that I had from the supermarket were 2 stems of lilies. They're not open yet, but they're quite a nice size head. And I've got 2 stems. And if you can imagine, when they open, they're going to be quite large. And these I'm going to choose to create my focal area at the base of the arrangement. And to make sure that the height of the arrangement compensates for the size of those lilies when they open, I'm going to go quite tall. Now, the general guidelines are twice the height of your container. I'm a bit limited with the height because that's the longest piece of foliage that I have. So we'll just take a little look at this and see how it's going to work. Now, it's naturally bending inwards towards the centre, so I would like to use that so that it creates your eye movement to come back into the design. So for me, it's going to work better on the left hand side of the arrangement as I'm looking at it. So I'm looking at it from the front at the moment, and I'll spin it round in just a second, make sure that it's fully in the camera view, and I think that works quite well. So that's just in camera view as well. And if I turn it round, you'll see that it's slightly angled inwards, and that will help draw your eye into the middle of the design and pick up on whatever flowers I choose to use over here. If we'd have used this facing outwards, your eye would have been drawn away from the flowers and it wouldn't have anything to bring your eye back into the floral design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that centre section there, just so that we accentuate that curve more towards the centre. And I'm going to do the same with these 2 lower bits here. And any branches or small sections that are looking a bit untidy, and then I can reuse these down low at the base. It will help bring the colour down, and it will help give me a lovely colour link between the top and the bottom. Now you'll see I have a slight section here where I don't have that lovely autumnal red colour, that beautiful burgundy tone. So what I'm going to do is cut myself a smaller piece that will slot quite comfortably in there, and it will help bring that gorgeous red colour in all the way down to the bottom. If I feel at the end that this top section is a bit heavy, I can remove it. But I'm trying to remember that those lilies will open quite large there at the bottom. So I need to make sure that we have some visual weight at the top of the arrangement as well. Okay, so I think that's worked quite well so far. Let's just clear ourselves a bit of space and work how we're going to place this lovely buried material into the design. Now, it would have been nice if I could have got it in following the line of the foliage at the back, but this way the berry is facing the back. So the best position for this is going to be maybe on the opposite side of my arrangement, or slightly curved there in the centre. And that's where I'm going to try it. It's a really tough piece of material, so I've done the angled cut on the bottom, so I make sure it takes up plenty of water, and I'm going to place it quite close to the centre section, but not hiding the berry or that lovely burgundy foliage that's coming up at the back. If I had a choice, I would have picked 2 that were branching in the same direction, but I can't help it that they're facing in opposite directions. It's still going to give me a really interesting design. Now we're going to use some more of the foliage at the base, but before I overfill my floral foam, I'm going to start adding in my flowers. Before I started the video, I looked in the bunch to see where I thought each piece of material would look best. And I only have this one single solitary stem of Snapdragon, and that I'm going to use up quite tall to make the most of its height and not to lose that lovely shape. The line material, so this linear shaped flower, is going to work much better towards the top of my design. It helps draw your eye down to the centre and down to the more interesting material there at the bottom. And you could, if you had a very minimal selection of flowers, you could leave it just like that by filling in the bottom section. But I do have these wonderful lily stems, and mine are yellow this time, and the bunch I showed you at the beginning, they were orange, and they are going to open up quite large. If you think of that size of the head, I need to make space in the arrangement so they can open up fully. So we'll start with one slightly longer, and this one is going to tuck in really nicely alongside my Snapdragon. So you can see that I'm going to have a link of flowers working their way down towards the base. And then the larger head of the lily, this one has 3 stems. This is going to work well towards my focal point, that position in the front. And we're going to angle that down into the foam so that when that opens, there's plenty of room around it to open up fully, and it's not going to get squashed or damaged by any other material. Now we have a little bit of white on the top section here, so it would be quite pertinent at this point to add in some of the white Tanacetum. Now this looks a little bit like a chrysanthemum, but the Tanacetum is part of the feverfew or the daisy family, and it's quite a soft stem flower. What I'm looking to do is just to thin it out slightly so that we don't have such a heavy head. So I've taken this top section off to make this stem more elongated and thinner, so it will work further away from the centre. Also will allow you to get more out of your stem and more out of your bunch, but it will help to link with a white section on the top, and then I can add more pieces down towards the base, so that lovely white colouring is working down towards the bottom. Now what I've done here, I've tucked that larger piece of Tanacetum behind the lily, so when the lily opens, there's still space to not damage it and not cause any issues as the flower opens. But the white flower will give me recession, which is your eye drawn down towards the bottom. It covers my floral foam, and it gives me widths and some sides to my arrangement. So far that's working really well, and I do have these 2 small little offshoots of the Tanacetum flower, which I'll pop in just there, so we have a lovely step-in visual movement there with that white Tanacetum flower. Now I will link all the names of the flowers in the description box below, so if you're unsure of anything, they will be recapped there at the bottom. Now a flower that you might not have seen before that was also included in the bunch is this very autumnal flower. This is called Carthamus, and it's almost like a thistle in its appearance, but it has this wonderful orange, almost like a pincushion head on it. And these stems are quite long, and rather than using the whole bunch as it is, which I think is going to be too overpowering, I'm going to cut them down and use them as individual stems. And these are going to help draw my eye out slightly to the right hand side. So it's almost becoming an asymmetric design. It's slightly longer on one side, and that has evolved really into that type of shape because I'm trying to use the flowers to their best advantage. I'm going to group them together. They're not the best quality Carthamus, I have to say. I think they've possibly been damaged in the packaging, and I didn't notice it when I bought the bunch. But they're going to work fine for today's demonstration. And then I'm going to cut one quite short. It's going to sit below the lily heads when they open up. But already with just a simple £5 bouquet, you've got quite a striking design. And for those of you who are looking for designs to do for the church, you could make a matching pair of these on either side of the altar. They would look wonderful in the window of a church as well. And you've got quite a large design without spending a massive amount of money. So sometimes, you know, just using the flowers in a more economical way, splitting them down and using the stems in more than one place will get you a really nice design. Now, because I've come out now to the right hand side, I can use some more of this fabulous darker foliage. It's going to give me a link between the foliage at the height, and it's going to elongate the arrangement there at the side. Now, before I started this, I had a rough idea in my head of what I was going to do, but designs do evolve, and sometimes the lily might be more open, it might be a smaller head, and you might have to put it in a different position. But I think this is working quite well. At this stage, I'm going to introduce a little foliage towards the back because I feel that there is almost a gap running through from the front to the back. And like I express so many times when I do a tutorial, it's really important that your design has height, it has width, and it has depth from the front to the back. You don't want your arrangement to look really flat, and you certainly don't want it to fall over if you don't have any flowers or any foliage there at the back. Right, okay, so I still have 2 more stems to use. I have 2 yellow coloured Tanacetum, and think in my mind that the yellow of the lily is going to be very strong when it opens up at the bottom. So my thoughts are going to be that I introduce some yellow towards the height, and it's just about long enough to accompany my one single snapdragon that was at the top. Then I have a continuous yellow link from top to bottom. I'm hoping that these lilies are going to be yellow when they open. They could end up being orange, but that won't matter too much because it'll link with the orange Carthamus that I have there at the bottom. Now I'm going to use the remainder of the yellow flower, this very soft stem, delicate flower, just to fill in any gaps and distribute yellow colouring throughout the bottom. I don't want to over clutter. You know, sometimes you have to stop adding flowers. Even though the bunch might have some extra flowers that you want to use, you've got to sometimes be quite strict with yourself and not adding anything that's going to over clutter the design. We need some space within the arrangement. We need all the flowers to be visible and not too cluttered. Okay, now what I'm just going to do is my yellow starting flower is here, then my next yellow flower is in that position. So I'm going to introduce another bit of yellow up high. You can't always do that. It depends on the flower quantities you've got. But I think, you know, for a £5 mixed bunch, you've ended up with a really super design that's going to be quite effective and quite striking. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to add in at the back some of the privet, and I'm going to angle it backwards again, so we're creating depth and we're making our eye travel towards the back. I'm making sure that it's deep into the floral foam and that it's secure and it's not going to fall out. Now at this stage, I often think when I edit the video that from where you're watching, the design looks like it's complete. But because I'm on top of it and I'm much closer to it, I can still see that there is foam visible and that I need to cover and fill in any gaps. Right, now what I'm also going to do is bring some of the privet onto my right hand side. Now I didn't have a great deal of foam above the container to start with, so there isn't a lot of space for me to come out sideways. So I have to limit myself to the amount of material that I'm adding in on the side there. I'm going to add a few small bits through the middle because this is going to help link the colour from the top to the side. I don't need a great deal of the variegated foliage because a lot of my foam is fairly covered. And I think if I just take a moment to look at it, the area that I feel needs something is the back section here. Needs filling out, a little bit of thickening up, just to make sure that the outline is quite clear. But I do also have these beautiful acorns. And what I think I'm going to do with the acorns is remove a fair amount of the foliage so that the acorns are a little bit clearer, and I'm going to see if I can position them so they're more towards the front of my container. They would be nice if they were dangling down a little bit more over the front, but that might not be achievable with the shape of the stem. If we just take a look at this one, we just remove some of the greenery off that one. You can see with that one, it's already positioned downwards. So I'm going to be able to get that one in quite happily, draping down towards the front. Even though my foam isn't raised above the side of my container, they are going to fit in there quite nicely. I'm quite pleased with that. That's turned out really well. I'm going to add that foliage that I wanted on what is the right side of the arrangement when you're looking at it. And I'm going to use some of this textured oak. Coarse oak is one of our traditional British foliages, but I'm sure wherever you are, whatever part of the world you're from, you have an ample supply of foliage that you could use there. And I think I'm done. So a design that was possibly going to be linear in fashion when I started and almost vertical has turned out to be asymmetrical. So we've got a longer side on that right hand side, but it's in proportion with the container. So we're about at least twice the height of my container, which is a really good proportion for the size of your base if you're doing traditional work. And my side is roughly half of the distance of my height. Remember that at the moment this section here is maybe looking a bit lost because those lilies haven't opened up, but when they do, we're going to get a real striking colour combination and a real strong focal point. So I hope you've enjoyed. One more to add to the supermarket series. A great bunch from Morrison's Supermarket here in the UK. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so and hit that bell to be notified every time I upload a new tutorial. And I look forward to seeing you again very soon. So bye for now.